The Acolyte's out. We're gonna talk about the Acolyte, and it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun, and it's gonna be Alex and Molly. Boo, 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 boo.
I kind of forgot that happened.
I forgot we got music for it.
Fortunately, I did not forget to write down. That was from Jordan Michael Peterson. Of course, our first Acolytes Out live stream, we had Christina on and she improvised a theme song for us because she said we needed one. So then I was using that. And then Jordan Michael Peterson, thank you so much, emailed me this past week and unprompted just wrote piano music to accompany it. And that little like da 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 at the end brings me so much joy. He did not ask me to do this at all, but I did put a link to his Spotify in the description because that just makes me smile so much and was so much fun. So thank you, Jordan.
It just fits so well. It also just reminds me of like a late 70s, early 80s like sitcom. So I feel like we need some sort of weird, like wacky credits to roll too.
We need our own like variety show, like the holiday special.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are not talking about the holiday special today. Thank goodness. We are talking about the Acolyte, episode 6 called Teach/Corrupt. And we're going to go ahead and bring in our guest this week. We have Friends of the Force. I keep wanting to say we have our friends of the Force joining us, but that sounds like a lot to say. But welcome, Brad and Sarah.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
We were just talking about this, but when we knew that the Acolyte was going to be a High Republic thing and we were getting ready to ask guests to come on, I really wanted to prioritize people who had been keeping up with the High Republic and talking about it like you do on your podcast. And so you were right there at the top of our list that we wanted to get on. So thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for thinking of us. Yeah.
It's nice to talk about High Republic TV for a change. So it's a special place to be now in Star Wars fandom.
And it worked out because this episode did have some fun little High Republic book connections, Easter eggs we can talk about. But before we get into all that, we'll go through the episode like a scene at a time. But Sarah, what did you think of episode 6? I'll start with you.
Oh, I really enjoyed this one. I will say that I actually stayed seated the entire episode. I've been pacing around, yelling and screaming. And I mean, yes to the yelling and screaming still, but like pacing around, losing my mind over the past 2 episodes. I was really glad for a little change of pace this episode in terms of the shocks. They were of a different sort. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And we'd love to see the enemies to lovers in this house. So yeah.
That's a good segue into Brad, your thoughts, because you were already telling me your feelings about Osha and Qimir.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I was also seated. I can't say the same for my wife, who I think spent most of the episode on the floor in the fetal position, as another fellow Raylo. But yeah, this episode I thought had a lot of really just great intimate character building moments, even with Soul, especially with Osha and Qimir. Like a lot of just meaty lines to chew on about the Jedi and the Sith and the dark side and all those kinds of emotions that we're not supposed to feel as Jedi. So just a lot of like really cool things to dissect and pick apart that I'm excited to chat about today. So, and obviously we got another addition to the shirtless Men in Star Wars collection, you know, another fine addition, General Grievous meme.gif. So yeah, great episode.
Molly, what did you think?
I liked it a lot. Yeah, it was, like you said, Brad, a lot to chew on. And it's funny, I was editing our reaction to it this morning, and like our reaction to episode 5 was like so fun to edit because like we were talking a lot and we had like really great reactions to all the crazy moments that happened in the last episode. But this one, like we both enjoyed the episode a lot, but it's one of those where we were just like listening very, very intently and just kind of being like, oh, what are they going to say next? Like, oh, and so they're 2 very different episodes, but just some really, really juicy stuff in there to think about.
Molly, you kind of described it, and we've used this before as like the bridge episode from, okay, we just came down from like the first half of the plot and all this crazy action. So it's like, let's take a breath, really focus on like Sith philosophy. And yeah, so much fun stuff to say about the Force and the dark side. I'm also glad that both of you are into the ship, because I'm not much of a shipper at all. So I'm happy to have someone on the other side of that conversation to enthuse about that and educate me on it a little bit. Like I have nothing against Reylo at all. I just didn't really fall into it. I do ship Marin and Cal pretty heavy, and Evar and Delzar.
You got good taste, my friend.
You'll win me over tonight. Well, I thought that maybe we could start and maybe break this episode up into 3 parts, because we have basically Osha, Qimir, Sol, and May, and for Nestra and her team. So I thought maybe we could just stick with Osha and Qimir to start with. What did you think of the unknown planet at first?
That's Octo. And I even tweeted that last night, and then I read Maggie Lovett's interview with Leslie Headland and Collider today, and I retweeted my tweet and said, I was wrong, and that's okay.
We say that a lot around here.
Yeah, I'm okay with being wrong. I thought it was very interesting and very Octo-like. I would not be surprised if they're in the same region of the galaxy or within the same system. Especially considering this seems to be a place where the Force can hang out along with the Cortosis. I thought the setting was really compelling. Brad, say something.
Yeah, no, I think knowing it's not Octo is really interesting, because Octo could kind of represent the light side of the Force, and now this new planet is maybe the dark side version of Octo. I know there have been some allusions to it potentially being a Legends planet called Baldemnik, which is like a Cortosis rich planet. And so I think that's kind of interesting. We know Leslie is a huge EU Legends fan, so I would not be surprised if she's pulling in more from that to kind of juxtapose what we know before from like The Last Jedi. So I kind of like that these 2 planets can sit side by side. And they both got cute little creatures. Like, what more could you want from an island planet?
I still say that those little, I think they were called like Sucru or something. They put it out on the episode guide
Little
today.
like anteater ducks.
Yeah,
They described.
They do look
part anteater, part duck.
They look a little bit like the Thalassiren from
They
Octo.
do.
I'm just
little
like,
bit, like little tiny versions.
Yeah,
Same
Think
system.
around something. Yeah,
but I like the idea of kind of this mirror planet that's of the dark side, more connected to the Sith. Molly, you were happy to hear it wasn't Octo, because you were on the opposite side of that fence, and I was like, I think that might be Octo all day.
I was just like, why would they call it unknown planet when it's not unknown?
Because for us to do exactly what we did and talk about it and speculate. But I am glad they didn't let everyone run too wild, and they were like, it's not Octo.
Yeah.
But it is supposed to be visually, symbolically similar.
I also was like, if it were Octo and there had been Cortosis there, I feel like the Jedi or the caretakers, somebody would have found it and mined all of it already by this point. You know, like I feel like someone would have gotten to it by now if it had been on Octo. So yeah, I would have been fine if it was Octo, but I like that it's a new planet, or if it's the Legends planet, you know, it's a little more exciting to have just another similar planet like that in the mix.
For me, I kind of thought that it would have been really interesting if it was Octo, if Qimir was reading the same Jedi texts. Now that we know that he was a Jedi, so that's where all of that knowledge and information and hurt is coming from. But I think it would have been maybe just as interesting for me if it was Octo and he was reading the same texts that Rey and Luke are reading from in The Last Jedi and taking something completely different from them directly.
I like that, and I also just thought that, the Sith originally did splinter off of the Jedi Order, so really the Sith can draw their roots back to Octo as well. And I liked the idea that maybe they would have remembered where it went or where it was, and the Jedi it was lost to time. But we know that planet has a lot of pools that are good for skinny dipping, and we had some people bring it up already. So Beskar Gay, thank you for the super chat. Vernestra is shady AF. We'll get back to that. By the way, this has to be the horniest Star Wars ever. And Bill Rooklyn said, that swim scene, talk about being seduced by the dark side. So yeah, let's talk about the swim scene. I'll throw it to Brad first.
There was a lot of innuendo in this episode, I will say that. And I think that's largely intentional. I mean, Leslie hasn't, again, our friend Maggie Lovett had a great interview with her today, but she hasn't shied away from the fact that these, she ships these two characters and she's like, great, people are also shipping them. That makes me happy. It's not just my own headcanon kind of thing. But I think like what's really interesting is like in the last episode, May, when May and Osha are talking, and May's like, the Jedi took everything, like what's a life without love and family and, friendship. And I feel like Qimir is sort of offering all of those things to her, and also being really vulnerable. I think there's a lot of interest in him being like completely naked from the point of view that like he could easily die. She could attack him. She could kill him in this moment. Like he is the most vulnerable one could be, like literally unclothed. And so he's like kind of putting himself out there to her to say like, I don't see you as a threat. I see you as maybe an ally who I could teach some things to, and maybe we can find a common ground. He's not taking a like defensive position. He's not trying to intimidate her or make her feel like a prisoner. He's like, you're the one with a weapon. Like, let's go for a walk. Let me cook you some soup for dinner, like some chicken noodle soup. Let's go.
Good soup.
And she's like, I don't know what to do. This is a weird situation.
Yeah, I loved all of that because it starts out where he's just like walking around and he doesn't even acknowledge her. Like, and then he gets naked and gets into the pool, and he is being extremely vulnerable, which is something that she's not used to seeing or being around, especially when she was training with the Jedi. So everything he's feeding her is like throwing her for a loop, and she's like, what? I don't know how to respond to this. Like, she's like, I feel like I should get his weapon and, threaten him. And he's like, you're the one with the weapon. You're not my prisoner. So he's kind of like manipulating so many little details in this episode to kind of twist the truth just a little bit in his favor.
I
and
like
that was so compelling to watch.
That he's not even acknowledging her at the start, but he was sitting there waiting for her to come out, and he's like, "Oh crap!" And like grabs his bag and he walks off so she can see. So yeah, like it's all this manipulation, but it all has like a hint of truth to it as well.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting the levels that he's playing on throughout this series so far. I mean, I just went back to episode 2 and listened to him speak as Qimir, and the changes in his vocal inflection between episode 2, 5, and 6 is really like demonstrative of the various characters he plays. And I'm wondering if this is the truest version of himself that we've seen yet, or if all of this is yet another character that he is portraying. And clearly he can adapt to these different personas really well, which I think is really interesting, because the physical vulnerability of being completely naked completely throws her off guard, but everything that he does is exceptionally calculated. And so I'm really curious to see how that plays out. And yeah, I mean, I just was so shocked by the whole thing that I was like, okay, I'm in. I guess dark side. Yeah. I've been confused and convinced at the same time. I get it, Osha.
Yeah. When he had that line of like, can you at least let me get out and put my clothes back on if you're not going to join me? And I yelled at the TV, no, don't do it. Don't let him. Take his clothes.
I was like, join me. We run that back 10 seconds back. What?
I do
Star
like the
Wars'
idea-
first open invitation for skinny dipping. I love it.
She just takes his clothes and runs like she's a teenager.
I was talking to my mom, and like my mom was sitting there watching. She does not care about Star Wars at all, and that's exactly what she said. I laughed, and she was like, "Why are you laughing?" And I was like, "Imagine her walking up to here and being like, I'm not going to murder you. I'm not that mad at you. I'm just going to take your clothes and run."
I really liked the way that he started to dig into her failure, as she called it, of not being a Jedi just with the lightsaber, which again, like this whole thing is planned and staged, and he knows the second she picks it up, but just like, how does it feel to have power again? Like just that little thing, which now I really want to go back and watch the past few episodes, because I don't think I really picked up on how much it was bugging her. I can definitely kind of think back and see it now, where she's talking about like, well, my Jedi skills weren't transferable, and she's kind of making jokes about being a mech neck and like making the best of a bad situation. But I want to rewatch it and see if there are more hints about how much it's bugging her that she didn't cut it as a Jedi.
Yeah, and there was like another hint too in episode 4 where she tells, I think it's either Sol or Jecki, being on Kofar is awakening something within her. It's like this feeling or this sense that's coming back to her and giving her clarity. And so I think that was sort of like her first bite of the bait. And speaking to his calculation, I'm assuming this is all part of the plan too, to get somebody like Osha to that planet so that he knew the switcheroo would happen. He knew he'd end up with the other very curious twin, and he could kind of prey on that. And now here he is. I think there's like genuine intent with him, but yeah, there is still that calculation of like every single place that you've been and every step you've taken has been according to my design. Like I think that's how big brained he is. Like he's just thinking 20 steps ahead.
So do you think he always had his eyes set on Osha? He
100%.
said like, I made a mistake with May, but yeah, I did kind of wonder that at the end of episode 4. I feel like I can't tell yet, but I do like the idea. Either way, it's very Sith to do, to be like, I'll take you as my apprentice, and then Palpatine going like, how about Maul? No Dooku, no Anakin, no someone else, like constantly shifting your focus.
I don't. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I do think it's interesting that he's now trying to train her, because I bet he has an easier time training her because she did get some Jedi training and he knows how to like prey on that side of it, whereas May was never taken by the Jedi.
For me, I feel like Qimmir's statement of like, I made a mistake with her was not quite that he always intended to find Osha, more of a misunderstanding of where her anger came from and how deep rooted it was. Because I think we can see, we see in episode 4 when she's like, this is an impossible task, I can't kill a defenseless person. We see that throughout, that she really kind of struggles with that, and obviously he pushes her towards that. But then when May and Osha reunite, Osha's the one that says, you started the fire, you're the violent one. She's already much more rigid in her anger. And even when May is right in front of her attempting to appeal to her, she is unwilling to see a different version of events and a different version of what she believes her sister to be.
I like that rigidity, because May is the one that showed that she's willing to change her belief system once she found out, oh, my whole reason for seeking vengeance is alive. Like, I don't need to murder to get revenge from a death that never happened. So she tries to get away. But yeah, Osha is definitely a little more set in her angry ways, I think, buried deep down because of spending all that time with the Jedi.
Yeah, totally.
When he gets her to admit like why she's not a Jedi currently, and she says it's because I failed, you can just tell like the passion behind her voice in that moment where she's like finally admitting it to herself. And I liked that moment because it was like maybe she thought that it was too hard to live up to the standards of the Jedi with all of her baggage that she had and like the trauma that she had been through. And she's always been really true to her emotions from the beginning of the show. So it's interesting that she feels like she failed to become a Jedi because of all of her trauma. And now Qimir is like taking that and using it to manipulate her even further. It's like it just makes her more susceptible for manipulation from the opposite side. Like instead of the Jedi, everything that he's giving her is like sounding even better to her at this moment, you know?
Well, I think she probably has spent a long time with the Jedi being taught to bury her anger, which I feel like they really need to work on their messaging, because that's not what the High Republic books do a great job. And I think that it's actually Vernestra that talks about, it's not about not feeling, it's about not letting your emotions take control. You should feel your anger and your fear. It's natural. Just don't let it fester and control your actions. But I think it's a real fine line between don't do that and don't feel them at all.
Mm.
So I think some Jedi probably are just like, oh, don't feel that. Don't be angry. And especially Soul, who's probably like, I don't want to talk about what happened on Brindok. So let's just not address it.
Yeah, they're like, leave it all behind, you know? And she's like, well, I can't really. It's just kind of part of me. But there's a way to accept that it's a part of you and move on without just like completely burying it.
But I love the way that Chimir's line, like, this pain is who you are, is pretty much against what Jecki says, that, we're not defined by what we lose, we're defined by what we survived. But I think the problem is that Osha doesn't know what she survived. She doesn't have the whole truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think they're like just two people who've also felt like they've been wronged by the system. Like, why does Osha feel like she failed? It's because the Jedi wanted her to fit into a very specific mold. And so here Qimir is saying, there's no mold here. There's only freedom. You can be whatever Jedi you can be whatever Force user that you want to be and use the Force in any way that you see fit. And so maybe she's able to feel that she can tap into it in a way that allows her to not feel like a failure, but is not looked greatly upon by the Jedi. But for her, like, that personal vindication and that personal success might be more important. And I think Qimir is going to kind of push her towards that. It's like a selfishness thing, right? Selfishness versus selflessness. That's the core of being a Jedi versus a Sith. So, that's what it's all about.
Alex, your mentioning of Osha doesn't know the truth is so interesting, because ultimately her entire life is built on the omission of this truth at the hands of Soul, and that great back and forth between him and Qimir in episode 5, where his mind is twisted by darkness. I've accepted my darkness. What have you done with yours? Of course, maybe think of Comac Vetus, who I love so much. Even the dividing of the dark from the light is an act of violence, and it seems like he's put his darkness so far away. And in doing that and not giving Osha the truth, her house has been built on sand at this point. So I think it's gonna really mess her up whenever she actually finds out. And I wonder if May will be the driver of the knowledge exchange, because clearly there's a conversation that's going to happen between Soul and May at this point with how this episode ended, which was very jarring, that sort of moment. But very interesting, the Soul and Osha situation and where it's at.
Yeah, definitely have thoughts on how Osha might find out, and find out quickly, since we only have 2 episodes left.
Right.
I want to back up a little bit and just ask everyone, do we believe Qimir when he says that he used to be a Jedi a long time ago?
I do. I was throwing out around so many theories about Chimir's past and whether or not he and Soul had crossed paths before. And one of the theories was like maybe he was a Padawan at the temple at some point, but he wasn't there for very long, or something along those lines, or he was on Bryndock to see what went down. But I don't know why he would lie about being a Jedi.
I think I
Yeah, I guess-
agree. Oh, go ahead, Brad.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, how far do we want to get into the speculation? Because I know, I think the scar, is kind of the key to all of this.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people have been pointing out it's not. It looks like a
Unique shape.
whiplash,
Yeah.
So, I think there is some intentionality with the fact that we learn about his scar and how he was backstabbed in one scene, and then the literal next scene is the first on-screen appearance of Vernestra Rose Light Whip. And I don't, we know Leslie is somebody who likes to plant crumbs and have you figure it out and not really like hit you with the surprise out of left field. Like, I think she is setting up a very clear connection here and maybe a confrontation that maybe Vernestra trained Qimir. And maybe Vernestra made a really bad mistake at one point too. Our Jedi are not infallible heroes. And so I would just wonder how far back that apprenticeship might actually go. Is it possible he's been around a really long time? Emphasis on really long. And so does it go back to the books? Do we see him at the end of phase 3 introduced as kind of a epilogue sort of thing? I don't know. It's really interesting, but I think there's a connection to Vernestra.
Interesting that you say the bit about a really long time, because in that same Collider interview with Maggie Lovett, Maggie did bring that up, and Leslie said basically like, keep that locked away. Remember that. So, I don't know if it's a long time for a human being, because, if he's 30-ish years old and, he was kicked out of the Jedi Order when he was 12, I would consider that still a long time, but it could be long for Yoda too. I don't know.
Aslan Rel lived, 150 plus years off of the dark side, right?
Close
So
enough.
he found that
Welcome
path.
back,
Yeah.
Aslan Rel.
He got his eyes back.
Yeah.
But also Vernestra too, and I think at episode 2 or 3 when they're having that meeting and she recognizes the fighting style of May as being like a Jedi, I think also there's a connection there of she's not only recognizing it's a Jedi fight style, but it's her fight style because she taught Qimir and Qimir taught May. So, that could be it could be a red herring, but it could be another crumb that we should follow.
Yeah, that was part of the reason why I thought that he might have studied from the same texts if he wasn't a Jedi himself, was, his fighting style is exactly like a Jedi. But then I was like, are the Jedi so foolish enough to not, keep tabs on the people who are like leaving their order? Or at least like have cataloged why, or like Qimir kicked out of the order because he was really scary. Watch out for this guy, kind of a vibe. But maybe not. The Jedi are not always the best at keeping records, as we've seen in this series with May not being in Osha's record of like she has a twin. What? As well as, the iconic Jedi Archives line. I kind of think that it's possible that Qimir was on Bryndock. Like, I think we might find that out. I think it would be really compelling if the Jedi were actually going to Bryndock for him.
It's going to turn out that Kelnaka is actually Qimir in a Wookiee suit the whole time. Kelnaka never existed.
Okay, after this live stream is done, everybody, we're going to edit it out. We don't talk about spoilers like that here, because that, we're never going to be invited to anything again, but yeah, I think the Leslie saying to hang on to that nugget, like put a pin in it, has me side-eyeing and really hoping it was Tuesday again.
Yeah. It makes me wonder if, like, is there something special about this unknown planet that is keeping him young? There's like a fountain of youth or something there? Like, is he injecting cortosis into his veins and it's keeping him looking super hot? Because if so, where do I get some?
Yeah, he doesn't even have to work out. This is bull crap.
It's that anti-aging wrinkle cream from what was
Oh
it?
my god.
The latest Escape from Valo book that they're
Oh,
trying to use to
yeah.
keep the Nameless alive. He found that, and
Yeah.
that's how he's just gotten great skin and nice abs. That's all it is.
I mean, don't we correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we know that like things move weirdly on Planet X? And I'm not suggesting that this is Planet X, but like that time or whatever moves kind of odd.
I think I
the,
could buy
the
that at least.
the force can work in mysterious ways is my thought. If this is a force nexus space, then who knows?
Right. They've established that like Dagobah, Octo, places that are very strong in the force can work. Time works differently there.
Right.
Which is basically just a way to explain how Luke trained so quickly in The Empire Strikes Back. But we could say that, yeah, maybe he went somewhere. He went to Planet X, came back, and a long time had passed.
It just like, I guess for me, my first reaction was not, oh, he must be like as old as Vernestra. But because I don't know, with only 2 episodes left, I feel like that would be a little bit jarring of them having to explain how he's stayed young this whole time, unless they just really simplify it and be like, the dark side kept him young, because we have kind of seen that before.
Well, I don't know. Like,
When
Aslan
was his
Rel
birthday? When
Yeah,
was Kymir's
it's very
birthday?
important. I know.
Oh no.
Like Aslan Rel survived, but I wouldn't say he's thriving. We
Right.
haven't seen a whole lot of him at this age, and you know, the dark side is supposed to be like kind of cancerous. Like it should corrupt you and make you worse and look like the
Mhm.
Emperor over time. So like it'll be interesting to see where they go with this. But another scene I want to talk about between him and Osha was probably my favorite scene of the episode, and it's when he is telling her about the dark side, and she's insisting that, you know, if you don't keep up with your Jedi training, it fades away. And he's like, well, that's what the Jedi told you, but there's another way, and it's just by using all of your negative emotions. And like, you still want power, just use your anger and your fear and your hatred, and boom, you're strong in the Force again.
Easier. Yeah, it's way easier to do it
I
that
thought
way.
It was such a good and simple explanation of the difference between the light and the dark side. I thought it was fantastic.
And that, like you said, Sarah, that definitely makes me think this is just another character he's playing. Because if that is the case for him, he's being super chill about it. He's like being very nice and inviting and vulnerable, but he's saying, I get my power from all of these emotions that are super dark. So it's like, when are we going to see him like really lose it?
Yeah. What's up with that super calm, but he's just like simmering under the surface for sure. I also am personally not completely convinced by this explanation that it fades away if you're not trained as a Jedi. I like the Jedi, but I also am not like a Jedi 100%, the best guys ever, only good guys, the only good guys in the entire galaxy, sort of a vibe. And it's interesting to me because that's clearly what the Jedi teach, and we know that the Jedi have some sort of law regarding their ability to train children. If we go back to episode 1, wait, no, 3, 1.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The first episode in the timeline, at least. And so I think that ownership over the Force is the problem, more than if you're not trained in the light side of the Force, then it fades. That feels a little bit like a fear tactic, but not like in a malicious way. It just,
I think
that's what I was thinking, like a way to keep Jedi in the order. And to your point, Sarah, you're like, the Jedi aren't doing a good job of tracking who leaves the order and where they go. That's like part of their hubris. Like the first episode, what is it? Indara says unidentified force user. They think that they've identified all the force users and that they're all at the temple. And if they're not, they would know about them somewhere. And that's why May is a surprise, because they've let their hubris get to them. They've let somebody like Qimir on the loose. And because they don't talk about emotions of fear and desire and anger and loss, they ignore those things. Let go of everything you fear to lose, as Yoda tells Anakin. They don't consider those emotions. So they couldn't ever consider the possibility that somebody could latch onto those and draw power from those emotions rather than just the light, And so I think that's why the show exists, is because it's like a patient zero type of story of like, Qimir could do it. Why not Plagueis? Why not Palpatine? This is how the Sith rose. It's hubris. Luke was right,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, I definitely think there are links of like so much of what Qimir is doing. Yes, patient zero is a good way of putting it. It's like a little baby version of what Palpatine eventually does. But the whole training fading away thing to me is like in a real world sense, that if the light side is about feeling your anger and your fear but not letting it control you, that's like a level of control that does take practice, and it's something that you have to choose to do every single day. And if you get used to not doing it, then that choice becomes harder. So that is something I do think that the light side can fade away in a person if they're not uh, attentive to it. Whereas you're never going to lose your fear and your anger. That stuff is always going to come back to you. Like you'll be 90 years old and something will still make you angry and you'll still want to let that take control. So that's like, if you want power and you've left your Jedi training behind, it's like, well, just embrace your anger. What could go wrong? And
Yeah, semantics.
yeah, semantics. Perfect. I loved that line. I was actually going to bring up because this is relevant. Dan V900, thank you, says the interactions between Osha and the stranger were the first time I saw the Kreia influence from KOTOR 2. Saying semantics with those emotions being a path to the dark side was Kreia and Vergere-esque. And yeah, Leslie has talked about Darth Kreia a lot, and I think even mentioned that they considered mentioning her in the show and decided to pull back. But there's definitely a KOTOR influence there.
Yeah. It's everything that Yoda said in Empire: quicker, easier, more seductive. Everything he's telling Luke about the dark side being easier to get to and easier to use and can be more powerful, but it's not sustainable. Yeah, I really like the idea of just having it come down to, yeah, it's hard to do the right thing every single day. It's hard to choose to be better and choose to be good when you can easily just fall into anger and fear and let that run everything on its own, because that's kind of like just letting your deeper emotions take control.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of why the Sith, I guess, are able to prey on people a little easier, especially older people. And, it's something the Jedi want to get instilled from a younger age, be like, this is practice and it's a lifelong thing. So let's get started earlier. Where the Sith are like, oh, this is easy. You can feel fear, right? You want to feel angry? No problem. we can do that all day.
Yeah, and Qimir is kind of like using that as a way to get to Osha, because he's serving it to her as in like, that is who you are. The fear and anger that you feel about what happened to you is who you are. So why not embrace it and use it? And like, no one's ever really told that to her. It's always been like, leave it behind, get over it, move past it. So I could easily see someone like her being like, oh, you know what? Maybe when she sees what really happened or is told what really happened on, what's her planet's name? Brindok, yeah. maybe
So,
she's
someone
like,
who
yeah.
thought that her time with power had passed. Like, well, I tried and I failed and I'll never have it again. And Chimir's like, no, that's not true.
Yeah, we still haven't seen her use the Force since the flashback episode 3. But we've seen her kind of like tap into it mentally, like on Kofar.
She's feeling things.
She's feeling things, and especially in that Kofar episode, I could tell, like, to me it seemed like she was trying to let people know, and everyone was like, okay, yeah, but we got to do this thing first. And she was like, I'm feeling some stuff.
It's true. Sol kind of like, yeah, he was on a mission to save Kilnaka, but he kind of sidelines Osha for that. And she's like, I'm feeling that things are awakening inside of me, and to have Qimir come along and just devote all of his attention to her probably feels nice.
Yeah.
There's something also really specific that he does in devoting his time and attention to her, is like he specifically humanizes her by saying her name often, like every time they talk, and like really kind of zones in on that. And that's like a total juxtaposition to episodes 4 and 5, where Jackie is like, what is it? And then was that its name? So I thought that was a really clever, very clear, change up for him, and something that really like appeals to her, especially since she was called civilian in episode 5 multiple times, and everybody knew her name. Everybody there knew her name, the Jedi, and May and Qimir. Like, maybe you could suggest, well, maybe Sol was saying this person might not know her identity, and we don't want to like reveal that. But also, like, they're identical twins. They look the same. There's not like a lot of question marks about who this person is to May. So
yeah, and the Jedi are probably calling her Padawan too, like while she's doing a lot of her training. All the Padawans are, I mean, they have names and they are called by their names at times, but also they're just Padawan.
My rationalization for Sol in that moment, because I do think he views Osha as a bit of a daughter, I think he was getting into Yord's head. Like, the rule is get the civilian to the ship, right, Yord? Civilian to the ship, and like just to break through to Yord.
Well, it's like when they're using military jargon to like click into that part of your brain where, yeah, you're in fight or flight. Let me use the military jargon to like get past all of that.
Well, the last thing I wanted to talk about for Osha and Qimir is the helmet, rebuilding it, his explanation for it, and then basically introducing it as like, it can be a dark side cave if you want to put it on.
Your own little portable dark side cave.
Yeah, I love that. Another Empire Strikes Back callback of just, you put it on and it's just you and the Force and whatever you take with you. And then he just leaves her alone, like to tempt her to put it on. Brad, where do you think that's headed?
Oh, I saw somebody in the chat say like the dark side's like a drug. I think this helmet is her gateway drug. You know, there's a reason he mentions it's a sensory deprivation chamber, and like as soon as she puts that thing on, you know, the inside shot, the breathing, it almost made me think of Revenge of the Sith, like when we see the helmet come on Vader for the first time, right? Like as soon as that helmet goes on Vader, he is like all in. There is no going back from that, right? And so I think, you know, whether or not Osha comes back from that's up for question, right? But I think this is kind of that first step, that first hit of like, ooh, dark side's intoxicating. Like, I have clarity right now that I felt on Kofar, and now I feel it here with this helmet. I want more of this feeling. I'm not just about revenge against my sister. I'm not just about my anger. I'm all these other things that the Jedi never wanted me to be and only saw me as a failure. So now I can be more than that. So, yeah, I think this is a path that we should not follow. Osha down.
Do you have any expectations for what she may or may not see with it on?
I would be curious if through the clarity she gains, if any new revelations come out about Brendok, because like we saw in episode 3, like her perspective. And so I do wonder if like episode 7 will be another flashback from her perspective, but with the renewed clarity, right? Like, do we see it again from her point of view again, but it's a much different perspective, like a much different turn of events? Because we know the next episode's directed by Kogonada, so like how appropriate to go from her putting on the helmet, episode ends, and then we're back into a flashback. It's like she is re-seeing things again. Like she's seeing them with a fresh lens through her anger, through her loss, through her desire, all of those things.
That's pretty much where I thought it was going to go. Like we would cut to another Brendock flashback, maybe from her perspective, but I do wonder, you know, through the helmet, through the sensory deprivation, if it's still going to be not quite the whole truth, you know, if it's going to go a little bit in a different direction or not, or if we see, I think it would be really cool if she sees like a Qimir flashback, something from his past would be really cool.
Oh, that's so Fallen Order of you to say. And we get that moment, you know, like with Vernestra, when she is hearing that moment, or I assume we as the audience are hearing that moment of a part of the battle while she's walking through, you know, the trees on Kofar. So we're getting a hint of the echoes already. So that seems like a really interesting place to go. I have up until this very moment not considered that it would be any other perspective other than May, because I still think that there's a missing piece to May that like the audience needs to figure out. But I'd be really interested to see either Chimir's point of view or a story from Qimir or Osha POV round 2. Yeah. I just thought that like the choice to switch back. So it really felt like the soul moment was the end of the episode. And I was like, they're doing it to us again. We're going to have a conversation, credits.
Yeah.
And it was, we're going to have a conversation, not credits yet. Here's the epilogue to this one. Here's the after credits, you know, after credits little mini scene. And having that be an in the mask perspective was really unsettling, and it felt like a major turning point, because the only other like comparable moment we could talk about Little May throughout you know, Osha's journey so far, when Little May has popped up to guide her, and whether that's like a manifestation from May in the Force, whether it's a manifestation of the Force, whether that's from Osha, or whether that's from Qimir manipulating the Force a la Snoke Palpatine. But there's this other moment in episode 5 where we get the mask like really close up in the camera, and that's clearly like the moment of him being in, I think it's May's head in that moment. So I'll be really curious to see where we go from here, because I feel like there are a couple of options and none of them feel like the wrong one. So I feel like I'm on the roller coaster, but I can't see the track.
We desperately need to see May's point of view from all this, because like she brings up the fire at the end of the last episode, and that's when May is like, oh, you know, you've been brainwashed, and we need to see why May thinks that that is her brainwashing. And like here, Osha is literally in May's shoes wearing her clothes. And so I do think it would be cool if while she has the helmet on, she starts seeing it with more clarity and seeing it from May's point of view.
That's what I think just makes a lot of narrative sense. If we only have 2 episodes left, and one of them might be another flashback entirely the same way episode 3 was, or maybe it won't be, but to get kind of like Soul is telling May his version, and also Osha is experiencing it through the helmet. Maybe she's mind melding with May or something. And even if like I've been kind of hoping that the next flashback will paint the Jedi a little more favorably, so they didn't just like break and enter into these people's house. I would appreciate being like, oh, that's why they did that. It doesn't seem that bad. But even if it isn't as bad as we've built it up in our minds, I feel like Osha's going to be pissed, and rightfully so. because they've lied to her for 16 years.
Mm.
Yeah, and also to Sarah's point too, like whatever she sees through the helmet, is that still the full truth? You know, Darkseid is an unreliable narrator. Has Qimir imbued that helmet with the dark side to show her a version of events that he wants her to see or wants her to perceive?
That
yeah,
would
is it
be
still the truth?
fun.
Yeah,
You know,
with
maybe we do get 2 more versions of the flashback.
Yeah,
Well,
it's like
with
the Green
Sensory-
Goblin mask. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
sitting there on the chair being like, put me on, you see the truth. Is it really the truth though? You know?
with sensory deprivation, if you go into it already fearful, and like it reminded me a lot of Stranger Things, it can get messy. You know, your
Yeah.
fear can easily take over everything. So we could see like a dark side version of everything.
Yeah, Luke sees his face behind Vader's mask in the Dagobah cave. This is just the Dagobah cave, but you put it on your head.
Exactly,
A portable Dagobah cave. That's all it is.
Or my favorite,
what will
my
she see?
favorite reference, chapter 18, Shadowfall, literally entitled "That Which You Take With You." I went back and reread that one last night because I remember that messing me up in like 2020, and it's still messing me up in 2024.
I vividly remember
a good
that
one.
chapter. Yeah. Yeah, I've been saying I love the idea that we get like the half truth from episode 3, get kind of the same format as The Last Jedi, where Luke tells Rey some of the truth, but it's not all of it. And then we get the dark side version where it's like, oh, that looks really bad. And then we get like, here is the truth. This is actually what happened. But that might be too much to do in only 2 more episodes.
Yeah. I do hope the next one is not fully flashback like episode 3. I hope we're kind of bouncing in and out because
I could see it being
like we still need to see a lot.
We have seen a decent amount of that story, so we might just be filling in gaps, and then hopefully there's like a present day epilogue of May and Osha learning new information and what do they do with that.
Yeah. I'm excited to see Kelnaka again. Just going crazy.
True.
It feels so wild to me that we only have 2 episodes left. I feel like there's so much more to tell, and we've only probably got like maybe an hour.
This happens with every Star Wars show. I feel like we get to the last little bit and we're like, how are they going to wrap it up? I'm feeling the same way with the High Republic books too, by the way. The end of Temptation of the Force, I'm like, how literally how?
Literally how? Yeah.
I just finished that today, which is kind of wild to be reading that book while watching this show and kind of like where we're at now. It was kind of fun.
The timing has been wild between these 2 pieces of High Republic media for sure.
Yeah. Part of me wonders what the show would have felt like if a lot of what happened on Brendok wasn't so withheld from us, you know, kind of giving us that dramatic irony of like, we know what happened, but the characters don't, and kind of like understanding their motivations a bit better. But I think it really all just depends on the execution and the landing of this flashback, whatever happens next.
Yeah,
so I'll be curious to see, like, is it kind of an anticlimactic moment of like, oh, okay, well that was it, or is it like a real revelatory thing that we're like not expecting, you know?
I hope it's very revelatory because I feel like they definitely didn't treat Osha and May being twins as a big twist, even though we all kind of thought it might be. And Qimir being the stranger, we were like, yeah, okay, we kind of figured that. But they have definitely been teasing specifically this. They have treated it with a lot of importance. So I'm like, I really hope it is executed well. I feel like the whole season is going to hinge on that.
I hope it's not just
Soul
like
can only have so much Deus Ex Machina to be like, can't tell you now. I'll tell you in 20 minutes.
Tell the damn story, Soul. I swear.
Sorry, Molly, go ahead.
This is fine. I hope it doesn't turn out to be just like a wild gas leak on Brendok, and that's what caused a giant explosion. Like, if it was just like some weird happenstance situation, that will bug me forever.
Somebody left the oven on. Just burn the whole place down.
She's like, yeah, I burned the journal, but like, you know, that went out on the ground. That went out on the ground.
I know. Like they keep.
I mean, that's 100% what happened. But like, yeah, if the gas leak is the other half of that, it's like,
I keep going back to that shot of Osha seeing May light the thing, and then she goes to the window, and we don't see May anymore, and she turns around, and the whole door is ablaze. Like, no, with that something happened. May didn't do that,
Right.
at least not on purpose. But that was quite an inferno from just like the book.
Yeah, we still don't know why there was that moment where Mother Quarrel is like looking off into the distance, like she hears something or saw something. Part of me is thinking maybe because we've seen shots from the trailers of someone scaling the sides of something. I think maybe like, was it Soul from the flashback? Someone was
I've deliberately
where-
not gone back to look.
yeah, someone was not where they were supposed to be, and so someone might have been crawling around there spying on them, and that could have been what that moment is from.
There's a moment in episode 3 where it's like, well, and Osha's like, we're the only children here. What if they're not?
Yeah,
what if Qimir is somewhere in the distance?
Yeah, the two women are kind of like,
yeah, maybe he's scaling the walls. I don't know if that was confirmed as Soul or somebody else.
I have no idea. I remember that shot, but I don't want to go back and look at it. Okay, well, we spent like an hour talking about a third of this episode, and the episode itself is only like 25 minutes long. So let's talk about May and Soul on their ship, which we've already kind of touched on a bit. But someone we haven't mentioned at all is Basil and Pip. What did we think of their little side plot? Their hijinks.
Adorable.
I literally wrote Basil MVP of this episode. For sure. He's like, I'm here to find the truth. And just kidding. I already know the truth. I just need the evidence to expose you, May. And his whole moment of like punch, kick, jump, spin. And then him running up to May and, trying that and then stepping on her toe. Very legendary. Very legendary. And was also just so delighted to see Pip back. Although the reset of Pip was heartbreaking. And that comment of that Soul makes of like, I just see the way that you love this droid and care for this droid and talk to him and the way you love him, even though it's a machine. I was like, why are you, I mean, the audience knows that that's not Osha, but like, why are you saying that in this moment right now? Very interesting.
I think it's because he saw it had red eyes and it was on a new like Pip body. So,
right.
I mean, they have said Osha put stickers on Pip, like, she has customized her droid. And so I think he saw that's not Pip.
Yeah.
And that tipped him off if he didn't already know.
That moment of Basil doing his little moves, that reminds me of like in Mortal Kombat, if I'm trying to do like a fatality and I'm just over there like doing all this and then I go up and I just like step on their foot. That's
exactly that. Okay.
Yeah,
go ahead, Brad.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I love that resetting to factory settings is like a thing in the Star Wars universe. So I was like, oh, cool.
And it's the same way.
Like, good to hear that.
Just hold two buttons.
Yeah, it was like the universal language we all understood. Like, we were just like, yep, that's the button.
It was a little too easy, I fear.
Yeah. You could act like if you just had Pip in your pocket and you pull him out and he's got red eyes, you're like, oh, no.
I'm sure Pip can be restored once he goes on his old body. Like, there's got to be a backup or something that will restore him back.
Yeah, there's iCloud for sure. He'll be fine. Sarah, I do want to go back to Basil finding the truth and like having a plan and stuff, because I'm actually struggling to... I liked all of his scenes with Pip. I liked their hijinks, but I don't really know what he accomplished. So do you have any extra insight into that, or was he just doing his best?
I mean, my thought was when I watched the episode initially was that he was like, I've got it, and I'm going to tell Soul without you getting me. And that's why he's like in the vents or whatever. And then them showing up in the doorway together was the I caught it just in time moment. But then I went on Twitter, and everybody on Twitter was like, oh, Soul figured out at points A, B, and C that this is not Osha. And that was really interesting to me because that's not something that I read initially. I was wondering, whether Soul knew at any point, because my thought was like, okay, well, Qimir absolutely knows that it's Osha because of that tattoo. He knows right away that that's not who that it's not May. And the question is, will he play that up or not? And the question is, Sol has just lost everybody, his Padawan, again, more or less, Yord and the entire crew. And so he's so, in my read of it, blinded by his own grief, and he's propelling on like pure adrenaline, but is clearly suffering through the deepest loss. My thought was that he didn't catch it at all until the very end because Basil was there. But I think
That's
other
what I
people's
read
reads on it
too.
are valid as well.
That was really my only criticism of the episode, is that I wasn't clear on what Basil did. Like, it was definitely, I agree with his intentions, and even though you can't understand him or Pip, I was like, they're teaming up, they're gonna do this. But yeah, I wasn't sure if he, I guess I just wish there were a scene of him playing charades with Sol.
Yeah.
And being like, look at her forehead. It's not
I
her.
I just imagined like right before he stuns her, Basil is like tugging on his cloak and he's like doing that and being like,
That was exactly what I pictured in my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we covered most of my notes about them already. So is there anything else we want to talk about specifically with May and Sol? I will say that I still think Lee Jung-jae is just doing an amazing job. He's killing it in this role. I think all the performances in this episode may have been my favorite of the series. Everyone just got a lot to do.
That moment of him just like punching the table, and then you kind of see him go through a whole bunch of emotions, and then eventually he kind of like centers himself and he's like, okay, I have stuff I need to do. But that was like such great acting without even having to speak. But to what you said, Sarah, I also think that he was not quite sensing that was May because of all the trauma that had just happened. I don't think he was on his game, to figure that out. But it was cool seeing him kind of go through all those emotions at once.
Yeah, May pretty clearly outlines it to him. Like, when you are trying to really want something, it clouds your mind. Like, that's the simplest explanation for a lot of why the Jedi don't sense. But I agree, Molly, that was a really, really good scene. I think often in Star Wars, when there is tragedy or, we lose important characters, I think sometimes like we can move on too quickly from that and not really sit with those consequences. And I felt like sitting almost for an entire 2 minutes just with no dialogue on JJ and him just crying and being kind of upset. It's like some of the most human stuff that we've seen in Star Wars. Just genuinely like so good. I want more of that in Star Wars, of just like actually dealing with the outcomes of cataclysmic events, because that's where like we as humans like really connect with our own loss and our own grief. That's when we relate to these characters the most, not just with the sword fighting, it's with those emotions.
I really loved that moment too, because it felt like a callback to some of my favorite moments in Star Wars, whether it be that moment that we get in TLJ of Leia while the ship, I believe, is in hyperspace, and she's just kind of sitting there taking a moment. Or I went back and I watched Redemption last night because I was like, that scene, Moses Ingram, just she's feeling, and you can see it, and it's so powerful to witness that. And I felt the same way about this scene. I also wanted to mention, somebody mentioned in the chat I've been following, is the end of the episode. I know I touched on it like a little bit earlier, but like he has a whole shift in where his emotions are centered, where he's literally like, I have been thinking about for the past 16 years what I would say to you if if we got the chance to speak, and you're going to listen to what I have to say. And I thought that was very interesting because it was very centered. It seemed determined in a way that we didn't see at all in this episode, and that we didn't even quite see when he said, I'll tell you back on the ship, I'll tell you back on the ship. That was just brushing off of that story, but a certain determination here that was almost like a little jarring, I think.
Mm.
And yeah, I was like, the shift in figuring out who it is allowing him to maybe channel some of his darkness, or release the little compartment, the vault. He's opened the door of the vault of the compartment where he's stored some of his anger and his pain and his hurt and whatever, and maybe his failures, and maybe peek open the box a little bit.
Yeah, I thought it was cool, kind of a juxtaposition of, we see Qimir treating Osha like, you're free to do whatever you want, you're free to go, whatever. And then here we see Soul literally strap her down. And he's like, all right, we're going to talk. Even though like they're in a ship, they're in hyperspace, she could try to get away, but it would be a lot harder in that situation. I did find that a little jarring, especially on the second watch. I was like, yeah, he is uber focused now. And we don't, like, he turned off the comms. He like set a course. We don't know exactly where they're headed. Been talking a lot about maybe going back to Bryndock, but like, why exactly would we go back there? We don't know yet.
Yeah, I think the turning off the transponder and going somewhere else, it felt a little scary. I hate to say it because Soul's never done anything wrong in his life, and even I
should wait until episode 7.
I'm even if he has done a ton of things wrong in his life, I would probably say that. It's like that one tweet of like, we have to accept when people have done wrong, except Soul has done no wrong, sort of.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Soul is a goner, by the way. Like, every time he's like, the Sith are back. What? I can't hear you. You're breaking up. It's like, God damn, the Sith, they're here. He's never getting back to Coruscant.
That's a great segue into the last bit of this episode surrounding the people on Coruscant, Vernestra, and yeah, but they still haven't heard the word Sith. Soul didn't even get a chance to say it before the freaking communications kept going out, which did feel a little convenient, but whatever. I know that they have to keep the people who hear that word down to a minimum. So let's start with Vernestra on Coruscant talking to the senator. This was another, that was like a 30-second little bit, but I loved that scene and think it's going to be huge. And I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it, but yeah, what did you think about Senator Chewant, another Beastie Boys named Abed to Know, talking with Vernestra?
Yeah, I think it's interesting how the show is continuing to it's like dabbling in the relationship between the Jedi and the Republic politics. Like, we hear in the first episode political enemies, and now we know about like this one senator who's conducting an audit of the Jedi, and it's like kind of, again, these like worlds are sort of colliding a bit, and we see the kind of like the quote unquote separation of church and state like really starting to crumble quite a bit, getting to the eventual point where the Jedi are soldiers of the Republic. So I think it's kind of cool just to see those like little seeds planted here. And just the line, the Jedi are always transparent with the Senate. I'm like, that is just so funny. Like, man, right on the nose.
Because we all know where this is headed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly it. I feel like we're headed towards basically the Sokovia Accords from the MCU, where the government wants oversight of the Jedi. And right now they can be like, we've always been fully honest with you, and there's no reason for any oversight. And Chewant, I think, believes that. But if the stuff on Bryndock becomes public, then this other, I forget the other senator's name, but he'll be able to say like, no, the Jedi have lied to us before and they might do it again. So we need to pull them closer into the fold. And now they're going to become more under the umbrella of the Republic than they were before. And I think that that's going to be the bigger like story of the Jedi Order from this season. And it's so cool how it's all going to spiral out of like a smaller personal story.
I don't know that it's going to be the Bryndock story that gets out. What if it's Soul is framed for everything that happened and he does not make it out of season 1, and that gets out. That's because that's the information that gets out. And then they're like, oh, well, got to keep a closer eye on these Jedi then.
Yeah, that's
what I'm
absolutely a
afraid of.
possibility too.
I just think that it's interesting that it's Vernestra who's like, we're not going to tell the High Council about this mission. We're just going to go on it, and I make the rules here. Where I don't want to too explicitly do a fairly recent book spoiler, but there's a moment where Vernestra confronts another character and says, "You need to go to the council to talk about the mistake that you made." Yikes, guys! Yikes! That also makes me wonder, as a book reader, how much with Vernestra has changed, and I'm not quite ready to believe that Vernestra is the Sith behind everything, or
we'll definitely talk about that.
Any of those kind of big theories. I'm not even sure that I'm like, ooh, Vernestra is Chimera's master, and but it would be really upsetting, and by upsetting I mean a fairly interesting plot choice if Vernestra is the reason for all of this. Throughout a lot of the Jedi's history that we have known and read and watched.
I'll be delicate with spoilers, even though the book's been out like 3 or 4 weeks at this point, Temptation of the Force, but you bring up that moment, and I've been thinking about it the whole time, that Vernestra might not fully trust the High Council to deal with things, because she asks this character like, hey, you need to go fess up, and he does, and they offer him a seat on the council. So Vernestra might
Valid.
be like, what the hell? Like,
that's so real, actually. Yeah. Ooh.
So I can see her not fully trusting them. While we're talking about book stuff, I just wanted to quickly go through her feeling that hyperspace is unsettling. I thought that was such a fun little moment that is kind of played for a joke, but if you read the books, you're like, oh, there's more to that.
It's like, well, actually, tell me why it now feels unsettling, because we have the very specific reason about hyperspace. Me to my mom, she's like, what are you talking about?
I thought that they handled that pretty well. Maybe it'll actually come up in future episodes, because I was kind of surprised they talked about cortosis this time around. I thought they were just going to do like, oh, Star Wars nerds know that his helmet is made of cortosis, but this time he's like, nope, here's cortosis and it shorts out lightsabers.
And that's why I'm camped out here.
I think it's also interesting, the light whip being introduced in this episode. This was obviously something we saw in trailers, and I felt like, if anything, I wasn't so, jumping out of my chair yelling about it, because it was just to kill a bug. Rip to the bug. But, the introduction of it is, I feel like it can't just be this is the one for the book readers. I don't think so, because there's not a ton of reason to like introduce it and then never see a light whip again in all of Jedi history, unless you're going to say something about it. And one commenter also mentioned that Vernestra didn't mention that didn't tell the council about the path, didn't tell Stellan about her light whip. Great point.
Yeah, she has kept things under wraps before.
Yeah.
Yeah, the light whip getting introduced in the same episode as us seeing the scar, and it's not a straight line scar. It looks like it could have been from a whip. So I do think that's interesting. It could also be a red herring to make us all think, oh, for sure it was that light whip. Maybe the Sith has their own light whip. But I don't think Vernestra is a Sith at this point. I think, in my mind, I thought maybe it's more like Vernestra has a similar problem as Soul, whereas something terrible happened in her past and she covered it up. And now she's like, oh shit, Qimir is out there doing stuff. We need to take care of that.
That's why she doesn't want to escalate it to the High Council, because it's going to uncover her baggage. And I think too, like, there's a moment of recognition when she's going through and kind of like the psychometry of like Quinlan and Cal, like those abilities to kind of sense the memories of dead beings around them. And like, I think that's a moment of recognition for her of like, oh, I know exactly who did this. You know, she says, Mock says like, who else could possess the power? And there's like a pause. And I think that's a knowing pause because she says like something to tip the scales. Like she knows exactly who it is. She knows it's Qimir. Right.
And when the paddle or the other guy says like, could Master Soul have been the one to do this? She doesn't say, no way, not him. She's like, that's a big accusation. You know, she's keeping her options open.
Yeah. Would she throw Soul under the bus to cover her own ass? Probably.
It's like
I would see her do it.
We know she hears Soul's voice tell Osha to run. So we don't know exactly what information she's getting from just being there, but we know she is hearing that line.
Right.
And, I think it's also not automatically being like, no, I don't think it was Soul.
Right.
This is we kind of joked about this 2 weeks ago of just she does kind of fit this trope of
Alex made me very mad on our walk when he basically tried to convince me that Vernestra was behind all this, and I was like,
wasn't trying to convince you that. I was trying to unconvince myself. Like, this is something I do not want to happen, but it just like it fits this kind of trope. And my hope is that Leslie knows that this is like a tropey thing of like, oh, the helpful police captain who's actually behind the whole thing.
She's talked a lot about tropes in a lot of interviews.
I'm hoping it's kind of like the red shirts in episode 5, where even I was like, oh, those are the people that'll die, and Jordan, Jackie, and Soul will be fine. And she played with that idea and really pulled the rug out from under us. So I'm hoping that they're kind of throwing evidence her way, but I don't want it to be that. I definitely don't want it to be that, oh, she's Chimir's Sith master and she's been hiding in the Jedi the whole time. Like, it just doesn't feel like Vernestra from the books at all.
I think that it's interesting that the way that the scene between Qimir and Osha plays out is he goes, well, someone who stabbed me in the back. And she goes like, your master. He doesn't say a thing. He is fully letting her make that assumption. And I don't think that we should take that assumption as 100% truth.
Yeah, she says your Jedi master, and he's kind of just like, so this Cortosis helmet.
Right. he loves to lie by omission.
And the StarWars.com put out in their episode guide that Vernestra's ship is named the Kantaros, and I'm like, a Sith Lord would never. They would never do that.
Imri, we love you.
We don't know when she named that ship, to be fair, but yeah. She could
have renamed it to like secretly. She calls it like evil Kantaros.
Maybe she named it that in reference to when he tapped into his dark side. She's like, you know what? He was right.
Feels good.
That's it. I've seen a lot of people throw in distrust her way, and like I understand it. It's like we brought it up kind of jokingly in episode 4, and then now I keep seeing things that I'm like, it might be, and I'm like really terrified that they're gonna go that way. But I hope it's all a misdirect. And if it does turn out that she was Chimir's Jedi master and made a mistake, different beast. I'm more afraid that like she will be a Sith. I'm like, no, don't do that.
The only other reason I could see it being that though is it gives Osha and Qimir even more to relate about, right? It's not even just that they were thrown out of the order; they were failed by
masters.
A master that both respect each other. By the way, Vern and Soul are friends and have respect.
Yeah.
So it's like, it just adds a little bit of messy onion layer to it all. Like it's just good stuff.
And I could also see though Qimir saying like I was stabbed in the back by someone who threw me away could be his warped version of the truth, where like he neglected to mention that I decided to try and kill all of and Vernestra like non-lethally whipped me in the back and I was ejected from the Jedi Academy. That seems like something that would get a harsher punishment than just being kicked out, but
they would have
I feel like there's more to that story.
They would have his sign up
do not serve this man
behind the reception desk of like, if he comes in here, look out.
Osha's like, why were you kicked out of the order? He's just like, "Shh, look at my biceps, look at my
Too
chest,
strong, too hot.
distraction.
Well, I think there is one more thing I wrote down, is that Vernestra says almost to herself something to tip the scales. She whispers that, which is a repeated line from episode 4, that she thinks that May is part of a larger plot, something to tip the scales. So do we have any thoughts on what that is? Unfortunately, my main thought was Sith related, that let's, for just argument's sake, say she is the Sith master and she realizes that her apprentice is trying to tip the scales in his favor by recruiting an acolyte to come get her. That's what my first thought was. Again, don't want it to happen. Don't want that to be the answer, but it did pop into my head.
Yeah, it could also just be her knowing, like, he so easily tapped into his darkness when he was her Padawan, so she could be like, oh, he's actually still alive and he's trying to recruit someone. Like, it could just be making her think, oh, it's definitely him, and he's trying to tip the scales.
It could be maybe her piecing together the rule of 2. Like, the Jedi have to find out about it somehow, so maybe there's something.
Yoda is like the only one that knows about it in episode 1, right?
Well, he's the one that says that. We don't know who. I mean, Mace doesn't go like, what? That's new information to me. So
yeah, true.
It's I actually, because I feel like nothing at all in this series is novel, and I don't say that as like a negative comment, but everything has a connection to something that's like very quintessentially Star Wars, and part of the reason I've been enjoying it so much, and like, yeah, that feels like TLJ. That feels like Rots. That feels like this, or this book. And I've been having a lot of fun with that. So I went something to tip the scales, and I like Googled something to tip the scales Star Wars. I was like, does this line show up anywhere outside of here? And nothing that I could find. But if the Jedi consider the light and how they use the Force to be balanced, then someone utilizing the darkness and really channeling that would be something to, tip the scales very simply.
Yeah. She could also be like, it's been a while since we've had any real problems. It's only a matter of time before something tips the scales.
I think that something could be a dyad, because from my knowledge, I don't think the Jedi have much knowledge about what a dyad is. And I think Leslie talks about that too in the Collider interview that came out today. Whereas like the Sith, you hear the power of 2 and you think of Palpatine and Tross saying like the power of 2 restores the one true emperor, and I think Vernestra's realizing like they're coming up with some sort of weapon that would, like, again, tip that physical balance scale of the Force, and that's going to be 2 powerful beings who are 1, like the power of 2, the power of 1. So,
she mentioned that the Jedi just kind of like found their philosophy, they stuck with it, whereas the Sith are in hiding and they're trying to collect anything and everything that will get them more power. So they learn about the dyad. She does mention that those witches are pretty powerful, so there might be a connection there as well. Maybe we'll find that out in the next flashback.
It definitely feels significant to me that Mother Anastasia is one person who had all of the power, right? You can see from the marking on her forehead to, here are these twins, there are 2 of them, and then when May is kind of ascended into whatever position within the coven, it's on the corner of her forehead. Like, the power, there seems some intentionality behind twins in the first place, within the coven, because it very easily could have just been one child.
I like that I didn't really think about how Mother Anastasia in the center, May on the left, and then maybe if Osha had ascended, hers could have been on the right or something. Just, that's interesting.
That would represent the whole moon eclipse, like every phase of that. Yeah, there's been a lot of that too in the artwork.
Yeah, and May's marking was on the side of her face that was standing next to Osha. So it was on the closer side.
Interesting.
Interesting. I can't wait for some of our questions to be answered. You know what? I will never not think about what this show could have been if Leslie had more episodes. You know, I think about that with every Star Wars show, but this one just being 8 episodes, I was like, what if it was 10 or 12? You know, what if we get just a little bit more? I hope if it gets a second season, we get more episodes.
It would have been
this has
interesting
been
to see,
just-
like, if they had done like a Star Wars procedural of sorts, where they did, it was like 22 episodes, and every once in a while, like, May would pop up, and we're like, oh, it's a May episode, like the Smoking Man in X-Files, where you're like, oh, this is like a main plot episode. But then the rest of it's like they're just solving little Jedi mysteries here or there.
I've thought about that, like whether it was on that extreme or if this were a movie, just because the cliffhangers have been so cliffhangery. But like, what if this was all action packed into one 2-hour and 45-minute movie, and it was like punch after punch after punch, and we walked out of that movie theater like, what just happened to me?
Or if they did like a Stranger Things drop, where they drop like a group of episodes and then like a halftime and then the next group. If they could figure something out like that, I think a lot of the fandom would have taken this show a little better. I'm not necessarily a fan of having to cater to people like, I want it now. I don't want to wait for the story to continue before I make my opinion. But, you know, that's just what we're dealing with.
It's just, streaming is so weird right now, and it feels like this in-between thing where it's like, this isn't a TV show in the classic sense. It's more like a mini series, and it could have been a movie probably. I like the weekly, like, let's talk about this in Theorycraft for a week in between episodes. I do like the structure of this show, but you know, 8 episodes, and that's just a Disney Plus thing and a streaming thing of like, can we just, like, I don't know, pick a lane?
I think we need 10 episodes. Every HBO
Mhm.
show is 10 episodes. It's like the most prestige TV you have out
Well,
there.
House of the Dragons
you know?
is now 8 episodes for season 2,
Oh,
but at least they're an hour long.
Yeah.
Each.
I mean, Andor has 12 episodes. I think Andor's done it the best out of any Star Wars TV
Yeah.
show. You got like 40 plus minute episodes, 12 of them.
Yeah.
A lot of character development, a lot of plot, a lot of good story. So,
but even with Andor, it was very like up and down, and you could tell, you know, there were specific arcs
yes,
that had to
totally.
be split up.
But that kind of also felt like the 22 episode, you know, sort of season where it's like, here are the 3 episodes where we fight this villain, and here are the 3 episodes where we fight this villain, which I liked. And then, you know, when it comes together in episodes 7 and 8, it's like, whoa, here we go.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up with our guests, I did want to bring up from Madison Hoovian, said, just wanted to mention Pantsless Elzar Man before Brad, unless he already beat me to it. It's
Let's
finally
go!
relevant to the conversation.
How
Pantsless.
dare
I have
you,
been saying
Madison,
Elzar
no!
Man walked pantsless so that Qimir could swim. Oh my god. High Republic gives us one thing, it's pantsless characters. I love it. I love it. Thank you for the
Can't finish
comment.
When
a
is he
single
pantsless?
conversation.
Is it?
So good.
It's in Rising
It's
Storm.
in Rising Storm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
he wakes up
he-
from a one-night stand and the Nile are fully attacking the city of Valo. And he's like, oops.
I love.
Where are
that
my
line.
pants?
I think
He's
about
like,
that
why
line
don't
all the
Jedi
time,
have so many layers of clothes?
where
Oh,
he's
no.
like, this is probably why they have so many layers, so they like try to stop us from boning every time we.
Brad
The
loves
worst
to bring it
walk
up
of shame ever.
every-
Where have you been, Elzar? People have died. He's like, can't say why.
Yeah, Brad has to tell the people. He has to remind the people, like, Kevin Scott wrote this, and you better not forget it.
Kevin Scott did write it.
That's one of my
I-
favorite Star Wars books.
It's the
I
best.
texted Alex after I read chapter 53 of Temptation, and I was like, hold on. Hold the phone. What did I just read?
You said you needed a cigarette, and I
Yeah, and
knew
I don't
exactly what you had just read. I was like,
what do I do with this? And there was so much wordplay that
Yeah.
came up in that book and also in this episode that, like, doing both of those in the same week, I was like, my mind was so blown. I was like, what is happening in Star Wars?
Yeah, guys,
We're eating good.
if you haven't read the High Republic's books yet, after a time, you will suffer. It is painful, but and like you'll cry. But it is also some of the best, most very Star Warsy thing you can get out there. And then there are low lows in terms of emotionally, and there are very high highs, and both of them are equally enjoyable.
Yes.
Honestly, I love it for the lows.
I was like, I suffer, but I'm having a good time.
I love that.
We talked so much about Leslie being bold in this show because she's not afraid to like kill some of the characters that everybody loves. And I love that. I want to see more of it. And as a High Republic fan, you know, we're kind of used to that. So I don't know. Part of me is like, yeah, do that more.
That's after episode 5. People were like, okay, now it's a High Republic show. Yep.
I was like, I should have known. I shouldn't have loved any of them. Like, I shouldn't have gotten attached. I'm not new to this.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to discuss before we let you go?
I would just like to say Phantom of the Opera. It's so very Phantom of the Opera this episode. So if you haven't listened to Phantom of the Opera lately, there's my musical recommendation of the day.
Yeah, only thing I have to add is that the Osha and Qimir shippers are eating fine. I love all the fan art that's out there, and I will keep retweeting all of it. So it's amazing. People are just so creative, and I need to also go on AO3 kind of low key. So, you know, I might be spending my 4th of July on there doing some reading.
We're doing pretty good with segues today. So where can people find your retweets of all the fan art for you personally, both of you, and for Friends of the Force, and talk about your podcast and what you do?
Yeah. Sarah, do you want to take it away?
No, this is the part that you always do. I was hand signaling to you, my friend.
All right. Well, you can find both of our personal Twitters on Twitter. We're at Friends of Force on Twitter, Friends of the Force on Instagram. Again, we do a bunch of High Republic deep dives, usually like 2 to 3 hour episodes every time we cover a book. We take like the deepest of dives, just like Qimir in the little hot tub area. And we're coming up. We're doing Temptation of the Force. We got an interview with Tessa Grattan. And we did a fun Return of the Jedi visual archive interview as well coming up. So a lot of good stuff, but you know, hopefully some people come check us out and see what we're all about. So, and thank you again for having us. This was such an honor and pleasure. And you guys are wonderful with everything that you do for the community. So appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you on. And links are in the description already to go follow both of your personal accounts, the Friends of the Force account. Your link tree's in there. So go check them out, subscribe, all that good. Do you smash like buttons on podcasts? I don't really know.
You leave good reviews.
Smash the
leave a 5-star review.
Right. Yeah. So thank you. Seriously, this has been so much fun.
Yeah, this was a blast. Every week we're like, we're gonna try to keep you for like an hour, and then we wind up it's an hour and a half, and there's too much to talk about. So
there's a lot to talk about.
It's also a very Friends of the Force thing. We're like, you know, I think this episode is gonna be an hour 15, and we're like 2 hours and 30 minutes into it. We're like, you want to break for dinner? So.
Okay, we'll let you two go enjoy the rest of your evening, and we're going to stay on, answer chat questions. But Sarah, Brad, thank you again, and have a great night.
You as well.
Too.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye, friends.
So let's dive into some questions. Our first one is from Queersland, Australia. Thank you so much. Vernestra Rowe is over 100 in the show and looks 40. Could this villain stuff be a red herring, and instead she lives to the Clone Wars and dies in Order 66? It's a bummer that there's like just a tragic ending no matter what, but I think that she probably, you know, they're playing pretty fast and loose with alien lifespans in Star Wars recently, but I think that she probably is not that long lived. You're right though, she looks great for 100. She doesn't look like she's gonna pass
leave
away
the
in
temple.
another 100 years. Well, I mean, we got to see what happens in the rest of this season.
Yeah. I don't think she lasts until Clone Wars and Order 66.
Agreed.
That would be too sad. Also, I'd be like so over it if I lived that long. I'd just be like, ugh.
I know. Can you imagine Yoda? Like
we see Yoda and Yariel Poof and Oppo Rensisis have moments where they're just like, stop. I don't care.
Care I do not.
Leftist Hominid has the next 2 super chats. For all who commune with the Force, did Qimir call his master Vern, his Jedi master, or his dark side master both?
That's our big theory question. We've talked about this quite a bit already. I wouldn't mind if she were Chimir's Jedi master. Super hoping she's not a Sith.
Yeah, not only because it's Vernestra, but also a Sith being right there with the Jedi at this point. You know, we see it happen later that they're so close with Dooku and Palpatine,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, a Sith Lord, you know.
Yeah. It's a great Mace Windu.
I don't want him to be that close at this point.
Agreed.
In time.
Yeah. And I will pull up some relevant questions as well from Elliot Finn. Says, if Vernestra is a Sith, if Elliot thinks that Qimir is just a former Jedi Padawan, could this have always been the plan of the High Republic authors? Part of the reason I don't want that to be Vernestra's arc is because the 2 options here are that no, it wasn't a part of their plan, or it was, and I feel like either way it's gonna just kind of color my reading of the rest of the High Republic, where I'm like, well, everything I read about Vernestra from now on is going to be like, well, I know she's becomes a Sith Lord, and that would be a huge bummer. And even if it is the plan, and like Trials of the Jedi ends with Vernestra in like a dark place, I'll be like, all right, well, I kind of wish I didn't know that beforehand.
Yeah, it's because we got kind of 100-year gap ahead of where the books are ending to now. I don't think we're going to see any hint of Vernestra's like fall to the dark side, if that's the case in the books.
So I do see a path that, like, I don't think that she is all that in line with how she is in the books already. I can see a path there. We talked about it already, where she doesn't super trust the Jedi Council. They've kind of let her down in Temptation of the Force. So like, I can understand why she would want to maybe stay in middle management and hide things from them. But it's already a bit of a bummer to be like, she was like a bright young prodigy, and this institution has kind of like beaten her down, which I can buy that, but it is a bit of a bummer.
It is kind of nice. I've seen people point out that like Stellan, she is a little bit closer to the politics of things, and hopefully not in like a malicious way. That might just be her way of honoring him, maybe. I don't know.
And then one more from Calm Like a Bomb says, how much would the books need to do to sell a Sith for Nestra? Or even one that's gone dark enough to have attacked a Padawan? I just don't see it. And that's the big thing is there's
we have one more adult novel left, right? Trials of the Jedi. That's not enough. And they're not going to do that in the young adult, maybe the young adult, but
I mean, the young adult books get pretty dark.
I guess that's where a lot of her story has been, but
she's been mostly in the middle grade books. So I don't see those getting very dark. The young adult book, she's in those too, and she has started to dabble more and more in the adult novels. So it's very possible that she could be in the final novel. We do have 2 more middle grade, 2 more young adult, and 1 more adult novel. So there's still quite a few.
She'll definitely be in the final Trials of the Jedi, the final adult novel. I don't think we have time for her to be thinking about becoming a Sith.
Yeah, there's so much stuff going on in those books that I don't think there's time to spend on it. I don't think that's their plan. Again, I'm hoping that everything surrounding Vernestra is more a red herring. I do think I could see her having attacked a Padawan if it were in self-defense. Like, just because Qimir says, I was stabbed in the back, it's like, yeah, but what were you doing? Like, let's get the whole story here.
Yeah.
and not just I was thrown away. It's like, well, maybe you were kicked out because you were a murderer or something.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, because earlier in the episode, today's episode, yesterday's, whatever, he was like, "Yeah, I killed Jedi. They were gonna not allow my existence." And it's like, okay, man, you're
Yeah.
still killing people.
But I know there's like 100 years in between the books to this show, but that's still a lot can happen, but that feels like too much to happen off screen.
Yeah. This other super chat from Leftist Hominid for everyone. Are you sure that Sith are allowed to be hot? Sure, Anakin was, but the Force / Obi-Wan dealt with that pretty quickly. I mean, if we see a Sith Bith Darth Tenebrous, I doubt he's going to be hot.
Oh no, how'd they make him so hot? You're going to eat your words in episode 8.
I hope I do. Maybe I said that on purpose.
You're going to see that glorious shiny butt head coming out of a mask, and you're going to be like, oh no, he's sexy too.
I mean, they could have made the character of Darth Tenebrous just a human, and it could be Qimir. Who knows? But I don't know.
I think that, yeah, Sith are allowed to be hot. More than that, I would say that I think a lot of them, like, I bring up this line a lot from Lord of the Rings about a servant of the enemy appearing fairer but feeling fouler. It's like the dark side is attractive, or if it weren't, people wouldn't use it.
It's tempting. Yeah, it's all about temptation.
But if
seduction.
you keep going back to it, you're gonna wind up looking like Palpatine. But Chimir's not there yet. You're gonna get wrinkles.
Just like tanning. The sun. I mean, I would love a nice dark summer tan, but I don't want to look like Palpatine.
Gary24 fan says, last week I was sad. This week I'm happy because we got to see Vernestra's light whip in live action. Amazing what one random act can do for someone's mental health.
Aw, there you go. Yeah, it was really cool when she whipped that thing out. No pun intended, but literally just without even looking backwards. Just like,
360
no,
no scope. Yeah. I thought it looked cool. I hope that's not the only bit that we see of it. I'm sure it's not. I feel like we're, bringing all of these roads together. Vernestra is now out and about. I think she's going to take part in some combat. I think episode 7 is going to be a flashback. We're going to get some more lightsaber fights. I don't see them doing episode 8 without another lightsaber fight in the present day.
I mean, Leslie said in the Collider article, we've got more lightsaber action coming. So I don't know if she just means in the flashbacks or not, but I doubt it.
I can't imagine the finale would be an episode like this, like today's, which I love this episode and everything that it explored, but we want some action in the finale.
Danamaniac, while at this point in the show, the least sus person is May. Everyone else is hiding something or getting tempted to the dark side like Osha. Yeah, we haven't really seen anything from May's point of view yet, and I really hope we do in the next one because we are desperate for it.
I do too. I feel like May is the character that I have not really connected with. We haven't spent as much time with her. She just came off as like really clingy and like scary so in episode 3. And so like I want to know more about her. But she didn't lash out and murder Basil for stomping on her feet or anything like that. I guess she kind of murdered Pip. But yeah, I see what you're saying, that she is, even though she's hiding her identity, she's a little more upfront with what she wants.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up, Sean Room? Thanks for being a member of the 603rd. Favorite episode of the series so far. Thanks for all the great coverage. Thanks, Sean.
I saw him say that this was his favorite, which I love that I'm seeing so many different people say so many different episodes are their favorite, because there are so many different episodes in this first season. There's like huge action sequences. There's like really interesting, juicy stuff that are it's a little more calm of an episode like today's. So it's fun.
I wonder if this episode had any inspiration the same way the last two were Alien and Predator, and the first one was The Fugitive.
I mean, Phantom of the Opera.
Oh, yeah, okay. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Phantom of the Opera, so.
It's been a long time. I wouldn't mind rewatching it.
Okay. Maybe we'll watch Phantom of the Opera.
Maybe we will. I said that about Predator, and I shot that down afterwards.
You did. You got me all excited.
I was like, never mind.
I think I want to watch Predator tonight. I was like, oh my God, are we watching Predator? And you're like, no, don't want to anymore. Power Rangers Explained says, what if the season ends with us seeing the Siths back to back, or seeing the Sith back, and the final scene of the comics reveals it's Vernestra. Also, 8 days to your 38th birthday. Happy almost birthday.
Oh, happy almost birthday.
The season ends with the Sith back, and the final scene of the comics reveals it's Vernestra. Okay. Like, the show we might get another Sith in a mask, but then the High Republic books or comics or something would get to reveal who it was. I just don't think the Sith are going to be in the High Republic at all.
Yeah, they haven't really been alluded to at all. And the whole thing, the whole idea of the main villains in the High Republic have been the Nihil and Marchion Ro. And with only a couple of pieces of media left, it would be wild for them to jump to see, what's the Sith up to now on the last page of the last book of this series? You know,
they do love to drop bombs on the last page.
They could, but I would hope it would be leading into like, okay, so the next Project Luminous 2.0 is going to be about the Sith or something like that. Post, thank you for the super chat, and just says, thanks for all you do.
Thanks, Post.
Thank you.
The Padawan says, so do we think that Qimir is taking the place of Venomous? Qimir is looking for a pupil, just like Venomous was in the novel. What do you think? I still think that we are, just my guess right now, we are pre-Tenebris, pre-Plagueis. Maybe Tenebris is out there, maybe he's the master, but I still think that they chose this point in time specifically to not mess with the Darth Plagueis novel. So I do see some similarities between Venomous and Qimir, but I think he's a new character, and I think they're going to try to leave those other characters alone for now. If it gets a second season, maybe that'll change, and maybe they'll bring in some more familiar faces. But I think for now, it's just, this is Qimir. Well, he's the stranger.
Yeah, I do think it could be like leaning right up to the events of the Darth Plagueis book, because this planet, this unknown planet, is so similar to the one mentioned that we see Darth Tenebris and Plagueis at some point in Legends. Like
it's like the very start of the Darth Plagueis novel, and I think it's also in a short story about Tenebris.
So this could just be like right before that.
That Qimir could be who. Well, I think in the book Tenebris learns about the Cortosis vein on his own, but I was like, maybe Qimir is Tenebris's master, and then he tells Tenebris about the vein or something. But I don't know. And I will say, Elliot Finn asked, is Qimir even his real name? No, I don't think so. They keep referring to him as the Stranger, but yeah. I'm tired of calling him the Stranger all the time. So
me too.
I just go with Qimir because we all know who we mean.
Yeah. Scotty Heron wanted to share my favorite crazy speculation so far. Delightfully crazy theories on Reddit that Qimir is secretly Imri. Then another one that he's Comac because Vern is the ultimate bad guy. and all the letters in Qimir can be found in Imri, or because
Oh,
Manny and Comac are both 5'11". They
Never change, Reddit.
yeah, I mean, the way this show has set us up to just ask more and more questions every episode we watch, I'm not surprised at all at some of the wild theories that I've seen out there.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars fans already go a little bit too hard in like breaking out the red twine and everything. And now they throw us all into a mystery thriller show where we are supposed to make theories and have fun with this. But yeah, that's I don't think Qimir is Emery, or Comac. Is that were
Yeah.
those the two theories? I mean, this is kind of you brought it up last week, Molly. The if you hear hoof beats, think horse, not zebra.
Mhm.
They're both humans. They're probably dead by now. I know that there's a chance that a Darksider could live longer, like Aslan Rel. Qimir may be one of those people, but he looks nothing like Emery, and he's also way younger than Comac. So
Emery's just like a white dude, right?
he's like a tall, buff white guy. Like
Yeah.
he's really tall and built for his age. Yeah. And also his Vern named her ship after him, and I love that.
Yeah.
Danamaniac says, have you all heard the descriptive audio yet? Spicy. I
I've seen
almost
clips.
did.
Yeah.
Oh, you've watched clips of it?
Some people have been posting clips on Twitter of just some of the spicier moments, and the audio, this descriptive audio lady talking is just like, oh my goodness.
the woman narrating.
Yeah. Well, that's
sounds
what
like that, or-
no,
oh,
that's what
you
I said when I
okay.
heard the descriptive audio. But
Does it say like Osha's eyes dart down and dart down again?
kind of, yeah. And there's a mention of throbbing at one point, but that's in relation to the lightsaber. So, but we're all just like, we know.
That reminds me of Parks and Rec, the lady that doesn't want Twilight in the time capsule because there are words like throbbing and quivering.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Dan V900, Cortosis being mined on the planet makes it seem like it's Baldemic from the Darth Plagueis novel, with the islands where Tenebris and Plagueis were who did mine Cortosis there. It's a cool Easter egg. I think that's exactly what Leslie Headland wanted this to be, even though they're not naming it. Like maybe they weren't quite ready to name it outright, but I think it's fair to say with the Cortosis mention, they were like, it can be this planet, but let's just call it unknown for now.
Yeah, it would not surprise me at all. Like my instinct was that it was Octo, just because it seemed like they really intentionally, those islands look so similar, but it's not Octo. And if it's not Octo, Baldemnik is choice number 2.
Mhm.
They might not ever confirm it. Maybe they will in the next episode. Who knows? So I think it's a fun connection. I wouldn't put it past Leslie either.
There's a good chance they didn't want to confirm that as the name of this planet, just not to rile everyone up to get ready for Plagueis and Tenebris to show up. You know, I think that would have been too soon to drop something like that. But until proven otherwise, we can all assume that's what planet it is.
Yeah. It like the description of it from Legends is an ocean planet with like rocky islands, and it's got a Cortosis vein. So it just happens to sound a lot like Octo. And so I think it's fun to have it like a mirror light side, dark side version of it. Danamaniac, again, thank you, says the quiver in Osha's voice at "They didn't throw me away." Masterful work by Amanla. She's crushing it. I think this was her best episode as well. I could say that about just about anyone in the cast. They all did really, really good in this episode.
There was it was this one. Billionth Kevin also said huge props to Amandala's great acting as May's terrible acting as Osha. A clear-headed soul would not have noticed immediately. May so clearly doesn't understand her sister at all. I agree. Like, being able to play two very different characters is fun, but I'm sure difficult. And then having to play one playing the other one. It's
playing
like,
a guy disguised as playing a dude disguised as a dude playing another dude, like
yeah,
always fun.
I'm sure Amandala had lots and lots of fun doing this, but it definitely is showing off her acting chops.
Hugo Ease says, tinfoil, what Qimir said about the Cortosis helmet and its use to focus on the Force, could it be used as part of Vader's meditation chamber or helmet? I don't think it's Cortosis that causes the sensory deprivation. I think it's made out of Cortosis so he can short out lightsabers and stuff. But really, I think it would work just as well if it weren't made out of Cortosis.
Mm.
Although he did say that thing to Soul about like taking his helmet off and like, oh, and let you read my mind. No, no, no. I still think he was more talking about if he were able to see his face. I don't think Cortosis blocks the Force or anything like that, but
Right.
could be some new lore. I don't know.
It would be interesting. But yeah, I think Vader's chamber is literally just a room, a little clamshell room that closes all the way. So that's what makes it a deprivation.
It's just made out of metal and sadness.
But he can go in there and take his hat off and be happy.
I won't get my hat off.
My head's real sweaty.
Your turn?
Oh, my turn. Gabriel, thank you for the next one. Outside the unknown plane, a variation on Rey's theme plays while a voice in the middle quotes the Diasiri plays when Luke finds his family burned.
Outside the unknown planet, I think unknown planet.
Okay.
Yeah. I did not notice Rey's theme. Diasiri, freaking David W. Collins and the amazing podcast Soundtrack Show, he did like a whole episode on Diasiri. So now I hear it all the time, which is like fun and also just like almost like a Wilhelm scream when you notice it and you're like, oh, there it is.
I wouldn't be surprised if Rey's theme were snuck in there somewhere just because Kylo's theme was.
Right. And I heard that again during the credits. But I did not catch Rey's theme. Matthew Byron says the ship powering down is what Hitchcock calls the plausibles in mystery stories and film. TV and film is life with the boring bits cut out. Yeah, I was complaining about that earlier of just it keeps powering down right when Soul's about to confess something or it comes back on. And yeah, like that happens in TV and movies. It happens a lot in the Acolyte though. Just let the man speak.
Yeah. We just so desperately want to hear what he has to say, and that makes it harder.
Finish your story, Poopa.
Thomas Barman, could Qimir be a sort of Dorian Gray, as in someone else, a prisoner like Darth Venomous, absorbing all his aging? Oh, okay.
Like
that
same noise.
That would be again, we keep going to like them suddenly introducing like a brand new way that the dark side keeps you young at the very last episode of a brand new show. It just feels too risky for them to do something like that.
I will say I don't dislike the concept. I think that's kind of fun of a Darksider who wants to not look like Palpatine. And so they like pour all of that stuff into some poor person that they're holding prisoner. That's a fun idea. But yeah, with only 2 episodes left in this season, and one of them I think is going to be mostly eaten up by flashbacks, It's like I think we need to start closing story loops instead of introducing new ones. But I don't know how this would go if it got a season 2. Like we've talked about it might be an anthology, or it might be that Qimir survives all this and we continue to follow him, and then we meet this poor person that takes all of his aging stuff.
When I was throwing out all my wild theories about Qimir in the last episode, one of them was that he had a twin. So maybe if he had a twin, he's keeping them locked up somewhere, and he's just using their life force to keep himself. That would be really depressing.
That would be rough.
I don't want that to be the case.
Danamaniac, thanks for another one. Basil brought Pip back to life, and then May's treatment of Pip tipped off Soul. So Basil was successful, also loved him shooting for the single leg. I get that does kind of chain out. I hope that wasn't Basil's plan. He's like, I'm going to use you as bait to help tip off Soul.
Pip.
Yeah.
Well, they did have a little conversation. In the subtitles, it says that Basil is speaking his language to Pip.
Oh, okay.
Like, so
maybe it was Pip's idea.
Maybe.
Like that's just the one thing in the episode that I'm like, I'm unclear on what Basil actually accomplished.
Yeah.
But you know what? If it was nothing and he was just trying his little heart out to attack her and he was like, this isn't working, I gotta run away. All right.
It's tough when you don't have anyone speaking English / basic in that scene where you're just like, what's going on? Ice, thank you for the super chat. Really liked this episode. A breather was definitely needed after last week's chaos. A lot of great character work and setup for the last 2 episodes. Agreed. It was a really good bridge gap, whatever you want to call it, like entryway into the big finale.
Yeah. I think the next 2 episodes will be a lot. We'll get a bunch of revelations, I hope, in the next episode, and then 8 should probably be action-packed. Mandalorian Avenger says, has Vernestra always had psychometry? Not that I can recall. They have definitely... This is kind of like alien species having all of a sudden, it's like, you get a long lifespan, and so do you, and so do you. And it used to be a very rare ability, and now it seems like it's popping up a lot more. I think when a character like Cal Kestis needs it for a game mechanic, or when someone is investigating a crime scene like Ahsoka or Vernestra or Rey, it's like they can just feel the echoes of what happened.
This bugs me just because people get so worked up when a force power is being used by someone who used to be, the force power is being used, whereas, like you said before, it used to be something that only specific Jedi had the ability to use. But now they've really pivoted that to maybe just any old Jedi can do it. It just takes a lot of practice, and a lot of the older, more experienced Jedi are able to do this.
That's exactly where I was going to go with that, is that, it's an ability you don't see as much as just like force push or whatever. But I think especially someone of Vernestra's age, I mean, like, would you be all that surprised if Yoda started using psychometry? It's like, yeah, come on. He's had enough time to learn it. I think that it's rare for someone like Cal or Quinlan Voss is kind of the main example. They're just naturally talented with it. And they were gifted with it. They can do it easily, but that doesn't mean that no one else can learn how to do it.
I bet Yoda doesn't do it on purpose, because if you've been around for as long as Yoda has, eventually using psychometry, you're going to find out something you wish you didn't.
Yeah.
And he's like, nah, I'm not messing with that anymore.
I touched one of Ki-Adi-Mundi's boots once and never again.
Danby900, I'm expecting Soul to go the way of Xana's cousin in Darth Bane Rule of 2, where he gets framed and killed. He is a goner no matter what. He didn't help himself, just bolting and turning off the comms. Yeah, I am afraid that this will all boil down to what Qimir wanted, which was destroying a Jedi without a weapon. Like, Soul will be destroyed if he is framed for all of this.
Which in turn could affect the Jedi Order as a whole, help destroy the dream of the Jedi.
Mhm.
But yeah, that they're definitely leaning that direction. So I'm worried. I'm worried about Soul. And yeah, the end of the second Darth Bane book is bleak. Like they almost get caught. They're like the two Sith immediately after they thought, oh, we wiped them all out, good for us. And then they almost get caught a few years later, and they do some gross stuff to hide. Those books are great. If you've never read them, read them. Vacation Mode, thank you for the very generous super chat. I love how this is unfolding. Really interested in Soul and May's conversation. Vernestra's past, Qimir's life as a Jedi. It's such a better way to watch this series, having to wait a week. Love these conversations.
I agree. I think the week in between episodes makes it better. It makes it like more juicy, more rewarding to be able to talk about it and then wait a week to find out what really happens. I'm not really part of the fandom that is like, this should have been released all at once.
I am enjoying it this way. I do think that this is a series that deserves to like let things sit a little bit. And if it were a binge model, I don't think I'd be able to do that. We would just keep on going because we want to see the story. I could see it going either way. I would have loved to watch it all at once, but I think I prefer having a week to wonder what happened, and then like that's what I'm hoping for next week is just like a big moment with all the Brendock stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just personal preference too, just how you like to consume content. Yeah. CRPR, why didn't his eyes turn with red/yellow? Well, that's been a common theme that not all characters in Star Wars who are like embracing the dark side have Sith eyes.
It's only unless you're Darth Maul and your eyes are just that way.
He's like, no, my eyes are just like this.
Yeah, he's like, I can't turn it off. Or like Palpatine after he reveals his true self, once he doesn't have to hide as a Sith, his eyes are always gross looking. Anakin's eyes only turn that color when he is like fully dark side, fully embracing it. Dooku's eyes barely ever turned yellow. Kylo Ren's eyes, I think he's not a Sith, but they only turned yellow in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic, as far as I know. So the Sith eyes aren't something that's like, I'm a Sith and boom, your eyes are yellow forever. It's just when you're being real bad.
It's like in Jedi Survivor, your whole screen has to go red.
Yeah.
Fully embracing the dark side.
I says, it's crazy to me how adamant some were that Chimir's island was Octo. That was kind of one of them. Maybe because I lived in Ireland. Surely there can be more than one coast in Star Wars, right? I'm glad Leslie addressed it out of the gate. Me too. I'm glad she didn't like leave us dangling for a while. I did have that thought. It's like, yeah, there are 1 billion desert worlds out in the galaxy, so there can be
Pippin in there.
Yeah, there can be multiple ocean islands, ocean island rocky planets too. Pippin, come
here. It was just really bugging me that people thought it was Octo, but the name card said unknown planet. I was like, why wouldn't they just say it's Octo? I don't know. I am also glad that Leslie came out and said that, just so we can move on.
Yeah.
Francisco Gios, I like the new Skura creatures. They kind of remind me of tiny Max Rebos. Oh,
I liked them too. They were very cute.
They were super cute. The first one we see, the little tiny one, we see it head on, and it has like 2 dots. They're not its eyes. Its eyes are on the side, but it kind of
Nostrils.
looked like its eyes when I first saw it, and that made it look even cuter to me. But yeah, I think it's like part of the nostrils. So cute.
Mandalorian Jedi Avenger, thanks for another one. Now I have to read Temptation of the Force before phase 2. We're not going to tell you what to do. I mean, it's a fun one.
Yeah, before phase 2,
chronologically,
it doesn't matter.
As far as release dates go, phase 2 came out first, but I don't think reading phase, or at least that book, I don't know. I'm still on the fence about whether or not phase 2 is integral. Like, I enjoyed it, but I'm not sure yet. I think I just need the full picture.
Yeah. That is just going to be a treat no matter when you read it.
Oh, Temptation. Yeah.
Yeah. Ice, I won't lie, I was taken out a little bit by the scene with Qimir taking a bath. I get what it's about. It's a manipulation against Osha, but the execution just threw me. We really went there, huh? Oh, I mean, we went there and no one but you looked back. I'm kidding.
It is something that if it's in any other show, if it's in House of the Dragon, and he starts to pull his pants down, I'd be like, why did they cut away? But in Star Wars, they did cut away. And I was like, whoa, like Star Wars is doing this?
I listened to Star Wars Spelt Out's episode this morning. That's been my new thing that I do every Wednesday morning because they're in Australia. So like they record right after the episode and they have it out super early. And they were talking a lot about just how interesting it was that we keep having these moments between Acolyte and House of the Dragon that are similar. So like the twins swapping places, and they kept talking about the most recent episode and all the dong in it, as they said. And I was just like laughing hysterically on my walk this morning, listening to them talk about House of Dong.
But it is something that you just don't really see that often in Star Wars, to the point where even like, yeah, if you see shirtless Kylo Ren, people lose their minds. So it's a rarity. Star
Wars is leaning into it hard. They put out their own fan cam yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was like, Manny. Oh God.
They're like, we got to get in front of this. David James says, late to the conversation and missed the past couple of weeks. So loving everything going on with the Acolyte. Hoping the stranger is the first Ren.
We didn't talk about that at all.
Yeah. Honestly, we talked about it a lot last week. There's still that Kylo Ren theme out there. And in today's Collider interview, Leslie did say, like, it's there for a reason. Can't tell you why, but it's there. So I think we'll have a clear answer by the end of the season. So it's a possibility.
Breeze, not about the Acolyte, but I want a novel about Bailey and Shin, like how Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray was about Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. I think that would be great. We talked about that a little after the finale of Ahsoka, and I think I said like a short, like one-shot comic series of the two of them would be cool. Or a book.
I'd be happy with a book, and if Claudia Gray wrote it, even better.
Yeah.
Calm Like a Bomb says, odds of Vernestra versus Qimir and who wins?
Ooh.
So she has the whip, and like, let's say let's pretend in this scenario they don't know each other. It's just Jedi fighting red lightsaber wielder. They've never met before. I do like Yord was making a big deal about how erratic his fighting was and you couldn't predict his moves, but he might not predict that she's got a light whip.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be something like she's fighting with just the regular lightsaber, turns a dial, boom, it's a whip. He might not be able to anticipate that.
he might be like, wait, that's my thing. I did that last 2 episodes
I'm
ago.
the one with
3
the tricky lightsaber.
Yeah.
He pulls his lightsaber apart, and she's like, "That's cute." Pacha,
Pacha.
pacha.
Yeah.
That's the sound a light whip makes.
I almost was like, well, she's definitely got the upper hand because it has more reach. But then we saw him throw his saber in the last episode. So I don't know who would win.
We
but
just
I would
haven't
like
seen-
to see that fight.
We haven't seen her in action at this point, but she has been through quite a bit in the books. So I'll go. I'm leaning 60-40 Qimir.
Yeah.
Those are my odds. I don't even really know how odds work.
Well, I don't think any of those Jedi at this point in time have had a ton of solid combat training that is involving a lot of like improvisation and just like unexpected moves. You know, like you said, Yord was very like, he's not following the rules, and it's like, well, no shit.
And don't forget, Qimir also has 2 big guns.
Yeah, he's bringing guns to a lightsaber fight. Come on.
Just looking at Ryan, grinning away. You proud of yourself?
You gotta warn him.
Nah. Got it. Guiguio says, why do you think Qimir went from trying to kill May and Sol last episode to letting them go? For all he knows, the Sith's survival just got reported. Yeah, he doesn't seem that concerned about it.
Does May know where to find them?
Osha?
No, May.
Oh, like
who knows where
I think she does
go to that planet.
I think maybe the end of episode 1. Also, her clothes were there. I think she's been there before. But I
assumed that when she changed into Osha's clothes, she left her clothes behind on. I don't know.
I think that Qimir got away from the Umramoths. By the time he made it back, the Jedi were gone. So he's just like, well, nothing I can do, I guess. So I think he just wanted to focus on Osha. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe the Sith's existence is being reported, but he did seem to act like it was worth risking because Sol said, why risk discovery? And he says, because I want a pupil. I want someone to train. Yeah. And he found that. So he's like, I don't know, maybe they know I'm out there. I'll try to kill him later. He
started training her immediately without even asking. Just like, you got to hold your lightsaber different. Ice, thanks for the next one. I'm glad they did with Osha putting on the mask. Teasing us again with Sol about to lay it all out would have been agonizing to end for the week. Yeah.
I think the way like he made that tease and it cut to black and we were like, oh, that's the end of the episode. But then it faded back in to show Osha putting the helmet on.
Yeah.
He says, and the way they set things up for the flashbacks is really cool. Osha and the helmet triggering memories while Sol gives his side of the story to May. I really hope we get a full, unbiased picture.
Same.
I think we will. I think we'll get like the real version, but
at some point, yeah.
Yeah.
I hope. Jank, thank you for the super chat. Aside from it just being cool and used for hiding identities, is there a reason why so many Sith are drawn to masks? The stranger's mask is everything Kylo wishes he had. I think a lot of it is hiding their identity and just looking menacing, creepy.
I mean, yeah, Qimir has several reasons for his. It's menacing. It hides his identity. It disables lightsabers briefly, and it provides a stronger connection to the Force. with it on. Like, he fights like that, barely able to see. He's basically blind and still kicking ass. So
He's like Daredevil.
yeah, kinda. So Qimir has like a lot of reasons. A ton of Sith like Vader or Malgus or Malik need their masks for life support. So they didn't
Plus,
really.
gotta protect your noggin.
Yeah. Everyone be
Everyone,
careful.
you know, you're stupid if you're going out doing crazy stunts like this without a helmet.
It's a good point, Evangelium. But then you have people like Momin, who he kind of used his mask to enhance his power as well, put his soul into it, basically. Lady Shaw had a mask, Exum Panchard. It does seem like not everyone has a mask. Palpatine, Maul, Dooku, they never did. But I think Sith just think that they look cool. Everyone loves a good Star Wars helmet.
Yeah. It's just fun. And it helps sell toys. So that helmet sold out almost immediately. Vacation.
Oh,
is it? Okay.
I don't know.
Vacation mode. Maybe Soul read May's mind and figured out Chimir's location, and they are headed there. That would have been real quick for him to do, but I think they are headed back to Brindog, but I don't know for sure.
That's my guess, but well, you know what?
I'm not sure why they would go back there, though.
He did say that we need to save Osha. And we know that there's a chase through that asteroid field, which we have been thinking is Brindog. So it could be that maybe independently everyone says, let's go back to Brindog, and then they wind up in a chase. Or maybe he does learn where the stranger is from May, and they go there, and then they chase them from there to Brindog. Could be something like that.
Yeah.
Jacob Gould says, loving the series so far. If I had something to complain about, it would be the lightsaber hilts are a little too thick, and maybe they take Padawans to Disneyland to build their sabers. I agree. Like, the aesthetics of trying to, I know they're trying to basically do as much in camera as they can. So they have the LED lightsabers that light up and they fight with them. I do think it makes the hilts a little chonky. And I also think I guess I'm just so used to the digitally created blades that look maybe too bright, too perfect. Like, but I mean that in a not critical way. I like the way it looks in the prequels, and when they're swinging these around, you can just tell like that bright white core gets a little more blurred with color. But that's just like a Star Wars behind the scenes nitpick more than anything.
Yeah. I think that having the hilts be a little bit bigger to be able to house all the technology it would take to have like in camera accurate looking sabers. It's a hard balance to strike, but honestly, some of the lightsaber choreography and fighting in the last episode, I prefer that over a lot of the prequel fights because of just there's too much spinning and
I
twirling.
love a good spin. It's a good trick.
Yeah, but it gets old after 35 minutes in Revenge of the Sith, where they're just jumping and spinning.
Get worn out.
Too old for this. Move it along. Alex Von Gollum, do you think Soul turns to the dark side? The emotion he showed when he stopped the communication and went somewhere made it look like he's losing it. I don't know if he's gonna turn to the dark side, but I have to agree, you know, when Sarah brought it up earlier, he did change rather quickly once he realizes it's May and stuns her. Like everything after that, his tone, his demeanor was very different.
I think he wants to just have a chance to tell her the truth. I think he wants to get away from he knows the other Jedi team is coming and they're just going to interrupt him again. And I think he just wants to sit May down and tell her what happened from his point of view. Don't know if it's going to help or not, but I don't think he's going dark. But maybe he will, and then that'll help him be the fall guy for what happens.
Yeah.
David James, thanks for another one, says, what if Star Wars does a crossover event between the Acolyte, Obi-Wan, and the Mandoverse, a la the way Vector from Legends did? I am not familiar with... Is that a comic? I'm going to look that up real quick.
A crossover event, like a multiverse kind of thing? Acolyte, Obi-Wan.
It is a comic.
Mandoverse.
Oh, okay. And it kind of connects with the Legacy comics. Interesting. Maybe, I mean, they're gonna do... I don't know how they would connect back, but then again, Charles Soule is really good at doing stuff like that. He's about to do issue 50 of his Star Wars run, and somehow it's going to connect back to the High Republic comics because Aslan Rel is on the cover. So I don't know what he's going to do, but there's some way that they could try to do that.
That's true. He had Luke have that like vision of Elzar.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be neat if they did a comic like that or something. I'm still going through the classic Marvel comics right now, because like Legends comics, outside some of the major releases like Dark Empire, Shadows of the Empire, Crimson Empire, read all those, but there's a lot of other series that I just didn't have access to back then. So I'm trying to fill in those knowledge gaps and read more Legends comics.
Yeah.
Vector starts with KOTOR and continues in the Dark Times, Rebellion, and finishes in Legacy. Like, yeah, that sounds super cool. Ice says, May resetting Pip genuinely upset me. Now I'm officially against her now. That's a crime she can't come back from. I joke, of course, but it was rough. I also gasped at that. I was like, that's horrible for a droid. I'm glad Soul eventually figured out it was May and he didn't need to notice a tattoo or the absence of one to do it. It was just her behavior that tipped him off regarding Pip. I appreciated the small look at the political state. I loved that scene. I actually think the senator pushing for a review is because he has shady dealings and doesn't want the Jedi finding it if they were to investigate him. Rayancourt does sound like a shady name.
Mm-hmm.
I think situations like that are why the Jedi wind up the way they are in the prequel trilogy. Senators with stuff to hide throw their weight around so the order either falls in line or everything will fall apart. I think Vernestra was right to want to keep the Senate out because politicians would take the tragedy and twist it to further their ambitions, something we unfortunately see a lot in the real world. I likened it to the Sokovia Accords of, just the government trying to take oversight and control something that they have no business controlling.
Mm-hmm. Did you end up making a separate video about that?
Yes.
When is that coming out?
Friday. I was going to let July 4th be its shorts and stuff, but so Friday that'll come out. And then I also did a short history of light whips. So that'll come out like
Correct that whip.
Sunday or Monday. That's
been stuck in my head just because I was like thinking of the Whip It song. And it's been in my head all day. Draco Eris, this week my feeds were half I wish Qimir brought me to his secluded island and half Vernestra Sith confirmed. Red circle on Light Whip plus backscar. No hate. Successful curation achieved.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice timeline to be in, honestly.
My timeline has been a lot of thirst. And it's just like, it's an overwhelming amount. I've had to kind of stay away from it. And I guess it's that. And I'm reading Temptation. So I'm getting it
just
from
all
two
angles.
Different time periods. I'm a little overwhelmed by it all. But I am so happy that so many people are having such a good time with it. I can't be too mad at it.
Well, that is going to bring us to the end of this week's stream. We're going to go cook some dinner. I will say we're planning on doing a stream tomorrow, a Lego stream at our normal time. Next Wednesday, our after show might not be on Wednesday. We are going to do one. Goose from Triad of the Force is going to be our guest. Our schedule is just messy, so we don't know when yet we're going to do our after show, but it will be between next Tuesday and the finale. So I'll figure that out at some point.
You'll still have a review out for the episode. It should be out on the same regular time, but we're going to be really, really busy next week doing a bunch of different stuff. So yeah, we might not end up doing a live stream until Saturday, maybe.
Yeah. So we're definitely going to do one because I really want to talk to Goose about the Acolyte. Just don't know when. So be prepared for chaos next week. I don't know.
If we're doing a Saturday stream, I'm bringing drinks.
Yeah.
We're getting crazy.
Let's get some margs out. But thank you everyone for hanging out with us. If they're still going, like I have the past couple of weeks, I have this redirecting over to the Resistance broadcast and their live stream. So go hang out with them and bring them your good vibes. Thanks everyone for being awesome. Have a great night, and may the Force be with you.
Bye.